Okay, good evening, everyone. It's about 3:05 p.m. on Thursday, May 27th. This is David Grant. I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order. This is for the Universal Basic Income Task Force through Hartford Court of Common Council. With me are our task force members as well as members of the community. I'm going to go ahead and just do roll call. When I call your name, just please say here for the record. Carolyn Anderson.
Here.
Colleen Bennett.
Here.
Eric Brunner.
Here.
Thank you. Amanda Detmer.
Here.
Gina Rosich.
Here.
And Stephen Ross.
Here.
Okay. I do see that we have members from the community available and on the line with us. Is there anyone that would like to give any public comment before we get into the agenda?
No, not this time. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So as I stated in our first meeting and for the record, public comment will be available at the start of all of our meetings. As we continue to do this work, I'm sure more and more residents will become interested and engaged. And so we look forward to having them join us in our future meetings. Let's go ahead and get into the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of minutes. Now, it's a 2-page write-up, general philosophy on minutes. And this might be a conversation that we have to have after the fact, but my general philosophy is not to transcribe minutes, but rather to highlight specific points that are being discussed so that members of the public can at least follow along, generally speaking. They'll have a recording available so everyone can always go into greater detail. But because we are looking to put out a paper with our findings on this, is there another way that we should be organizing our minutes, or is what I sent sufficient?
I thought what you sent was sufficient. I did make one comment for a small correction.
Yes, I got that. Can you, for the record, just state what the comment was?
Oh, you said that I was specialized in quantitative analysis, and I am trained in mixed methods.
Got it. Thank you. Any other thoughts on the structure of the minutes at all? Does everyone feel comfortable from the previous meeting voting on the minutes? I know I sent them to you last minute, and so if you want to postpone that to the next meeting, we can do that.
No, you did a great job, David.
Great. So for our new members, that includes Amanda, Carolyn, and Colleen, feel free to abstain from the vote because you weren't present. So for our previous members, Gina, Steve, and Eric, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
Obviously, our current members, or new members rather, sorry. So Adam, for the minutes are approved. All new members, Amanda, Carolyn, and Colleen are abstained, and Gina, Steve, and Eric are ayes. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into welcome to our new members. So excited to have you all with us. If we can just do a general roundabout, I don't anticipate onboarding any new members over the course of the next month. So I think the group that we have now is a pretty solid group. We may incorporate 1 or 2 more community members over the course of the next 2 months to get in some of their feedback. But if you can do me all a favor and just do a general introduction, that way we're all familiar with who we each other are and what our areas of specialty are. Gina, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Dr. Gina Rossage, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of St. Joseph, Department of Social Work and Equitable Community Practice.
Thank you, Steve.
I am Steve Ross. I'm a professor of economics at the University of Connecticut. And I work on discrimination, education, urban poverty, primarily quantitative analysis.
Thank you very much. Eric?
Hello, I am a professor of economics and policy at the University of Connecticut, and I work a lot with Steve Ross. And my primary area of work is in the area of education and state and local public finance.
Thank you very much. Amanda?
Hi, I'm Amanda Detmer. I'm an associate research scientist at the Yale Child Study Center, and my research focuses on early life experiences and how those experiences shape children's risk or resilience for chronic stress, and then subsequent developmental outcomes.
Thank you very much. Carolyn?
Hi, I'm Carolyn. So my background's a little bit different. I actually work at Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield and have for the past 20 years or so, primarily in contracts, proposal writing, sales support. But what really, I saw the article in the Hartford Courant about the task force. So when I called David, I think, what was particularly important is for the past 15 years, I've been involved in that annual, we call it just the Hartford Kids Holiday event, where we are collaborating with Hartford schools to give kids the chance to choose holiday gifts to give to their families. So we've been doing it for 15 years, collaborating with the schools. We started with the Hartford Boys and Girls Club. So, I'm very enthusiastic about being on the task force. I'm particularly interested in, the impact of poverty on children.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. And finally, Colleen. That looks like you're muted, Colleen.
Oh, sorry, I didn't do it. I guess I'm sorry. So my background is mostly corporate. I work in insurance. I was a claim adjuster, working financial. Right now I'm at DOC with the state of Connecticut, and I've done a lot of community service in the area, mostly with school. I've also worked in the school system for 2 years as a paraprofessional.
Great, thank you very much. And Colleen, I actually apologize. I muted you because we were picking up some background noise.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can go ahead and mute me again. Yeah, it's kind of noisy where I am in Hartford.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda, which is research versus program design. Basically, in order for us, in my opinion, to be effective, as I knew from the last meeting, we had a lot of discussion on the research side of things and how we need to set the program up to be equitable and taking into consideration our ethical responsibilities. And it was a lot. And so it occurred to me that we probably should be more intentional with the way that we structure our work in order to meet our end of the year deadline. So I thought, well, the best way to approach this would be to divide our efforts between the program design elements and the research elements, so that folks can work on areas that are particular interest to them while maintaining the integrity of how to establish the program versus how to implement the program. And there's going to be some cross here. I'm aware of that. This is not meant to be working in silos, but rather to make sure that we're not dedicating all of our resources into specific areas. I know that when it comes to the research side of things, I may not be the strongest participant, but when it comes to program design, that's where I feel my strengths are. And so I know that there might be other task force members that we currently have or that we may be onboarding that don't necessarily have a background in research, but may have a background in program design, or vice versa, that have a background in program design or research, but not necessarily program design, if I said that right.
So David, I'm right with you. The only thing I wanted to add to that is that program design dovetails into evaluation, right? So how the program is set up determines how we evaluate in general. So the two, in some ways, as you've already alluded to, are highly integrated. And so it's a little difficult to separate the two at the outset.
Well, that's a good point. And so perhaps, that's where I would look for your feedback. How do you all feel we should best organize our discussions, since we are only meeting twice per month, and we do know that we have to have a final report by December, and considering all of the various elements that we need to incorporate. I mean, essentially, this task force is developing an entire program that will impact not only the immediate future, but the long-term future of the UBI here in Hartford.
We have to have a mechanism to get work done when we're not meeting, right? We have to have somebody, who's responsible for contacting state agencies and talking to them. And we have to work on sampling schemes. And we have to work on, as Gina pointed out, we have to work on how we protect people from income, how we mitigate issues of income loss when people get this transfer and they're already receiving other transfer programs, right? So there are a lot of pieces, and a lot of work is going to have to be done when we're not meeting. And right now, you're right, we are not organized well to get that offline work done. And maybe subcommittees is a good way to start, although probably we're going to have a lot of talk back and forth between the various subcommittees. And right, and so it could be, for example, sampling is a issue for the design, for the research side of things, or the program evaluation side of things. But at some point, sampling becomes an issue for the program side of things, because unless we want to go to the Stockton route, for example, and simply sample people randomly from neighborhoods, which is what Stockton did, we have to have access to administrative data of some sort. That's going to be a program exercise. But before, we can't know what to do in terms of sampling without a research exercise of who do we, right, in terms of how we intend to try to draw our sample and what data sets might be available. So it could be that tasks are with one committee for a while and then move to another committee, in terms of, for example, building the relationship with a state agency that has the information that we need to draw a sample.
Hey, David.
Go
Oh,
ahead, Carolyn.
oh, thank you. So has the task force considered and, looked into the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income initiative?
I know I have, obviously, but I'm not sure if, because I did send out the materials, Carolyn, that you put together. I'm not sure if the task force members have any thoughts on.
Yeah, I had actually, before Carolyn joined us, sent an email to you, David, Steve, and Eric with a link to the mayor's that webpage for all of the mayors to see if Mayor Brono would be interested in reaching out to them and being part of that. So I don't know if you saw that email, but that would be a question for him to ask. And then there's also the Guaranteed Income Community of Practice, which we should be in touch with.
I mean, would it help? I don't have an in-depth knowledge of it, but just if I just gave a little background, because there's currently 50 mayors that participate in 20 or 30 pilot programs in place, and the MGI, they actually give funding to the programs, and they've got, I'll just read, the University of Pennsylvania Center for Guaranteed Income Research that actually provides research support and, guidelines. So, if the city and the mayor wanted to be part of this, it offers a lot of support, because again, they've already supported 20 different cities, whether it's research or evaluation, as well as funding. So I did a quick, search on the internet of all the programs that are out there, and really the vast majority, the cities are part of MGI, and they just get a lot of, really fabulous research support, ongoing support, as well as funding.
Carolyn, I want to thank you for doing all of that Google search of information.
Well,
I
it was my learning experience. I was,
No,
'cause
it's
I didn't know much. I hardly knew anything about this a few weeks ago. So, from
Yep.
there, it led me
I
down.
want to,
so
I read through the Excel document and it was really a wealth of information. So thank you for that.
yes,
Well,
I actually wanted, that was going to be my next comment before, was about the Excel spreadsheet. It gave me an idea for us to think about different aspects of this, of the program. And, I'm just going to echo what Eric and Steve have said, is that there is, a relationship between the program and the evaluation piece that is in many ways not separable. You can't separate them. Maybe I need a coffee. But with that said, I think there are pieces that we can decide as a group where community input is going to be really key. And then there are going to be, there's going to be the opportunity for the researchers to develop the instruments, for example, and the IRB application for the strictly research piece of it. But there are ways of including the community even in the data analysis, in terms of the principles of participatory action research. And so I think the key here for folks who are not professional researchers, right, is getting the feel from the community about what is important and how to approach and build those relationships so that we are working collectively on behalf of the city of Hartford. And that spreadsheet, which Amanda had just mentioned, included some really crucial details that we can focus on, that we can really hone in on in terms of thinking about how we want to shape this, both in terms of the program and in terms of the evaluation. And so I started taking some notes about, how much for a stipend amount for the different groups, duration, right? Things like benefits counseling, criteria, who do we want in? Steve had come up with an idea for having recipients and active control and passive control. And, I had said in an email about using the Alice indicator in terms of looking at folks with a cliff effect. So that's like one of the things that we could talk with the community about. Do folks from Hartford feel it's more important, for example, to approach single parents experiencing the cliff effect, or do we want to look at folks who are, we're mandated to work with families that are single parent households, right? And so those are the things that we can look at if we want to further target specific groups. And that is where I would be very interested to hear from the community, for example, in terms of who to prioritize.
I would just like to echo two major points that I've heard. One, Gina, what you said about community input throughout this entire process. And I really think that in addition to this research versus program design, it's really important for us to remember that community input is vital in both aspects. And I really think that's where our other new members, Carolyn and Colleen, can kind of be our liaisons or ambassadors for educating us on that, community input. And then also what Eric had said about crossover, it's obviously going to be impossible for these to be completely siloed, just because that's not how this kind of program works. But I do think, Steve, what you said is a good way to start, maybe having subcommittees, and then it probably will become pretty apparent quickly how we can cross over and interface with each other. And then I guess, a culminating thing is like, and I'm new, so I don't know what you guys talked about last time. I think there was only one meeting previously, but I really appreciate what you said, Steve, about working offline in between meetings, because I'm a part of lots of other volunteer groups that have to do exactly that kind of work. And I wonder if this group has at all considered any kind of online platform to share the kinds of work, offline work, online, offline.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest that we either use Google Drive, Google Docs, or oh, I've forgotten what the other one is.
I mean, one that came to mind for me that I've
Dropbox.
good experience with is not just like a document sharing, but there's one example is something called Asana, ASANA, in which you can organize groups of people, and then you can assign tasks to groups and even tasks to individuals with priority levels and due dates. And I found it really very useful for multidisciplinary efforts like this one. And I think something along those lines could be really useful. So I just something to consider.
Yeah, this is all really good input. I knew that thinking about this logically, I took into consideration conversations that I've had with members of the community, thinking about the timeline that we're working within, as well as just reevaluating our conversation last month. And it occurred to me, there is no way that we're going to be able to design a comprehensive program like this, given that we're only able to meet for, an hour twice a month. So we're going to have to utilize something. I am bringing in Adam Murphy. Adam is currently on the phone with us now. He works here. He's one of my council colleagues working to support our council members. And so he's going to be able to assist us administratively. And so working through the two of us, we're hoping that we're going to be able to support you all offline as we continue to do this work. Carolyn and Colleen, they have the understanding of the needs of our Hartford residents. They've been doing this work for a long time in the city. They understand how to navigate our communities. And so I'm really hoping to leverage their experience to be able to hold some of these community forums, which I do think is going to be really important as we progress throughout the next couple of months.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add that, Carolyn, just so you know, the person I spoke with in between meetings was Dr. Stacia West, who's from Penn. So she's on that team. Yeah. And so just so you know, in terms of support, she's already, I've already had a conversation with her. And 100%, I think we don't move forward without having conversations and forums with members of the community as part of the design process, and also as part of the analysis process. And, I had a conversation with Dr. West, about what they did. So, we can continue that over whatever platform we use to move the conversation forward.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. So, just to level set for me. So has it been established that we will try to get Mayor Bronin, to be part of the MGI, because then we could utilize all the resources they would have to offer, including funding? Because, if so, I would think that might be the first step, because then, we can see all the research and all the funding they might have to offer, which would sort of guide us from there.
And Carolyn, I had meant to also address that when I last spoke, but I think that that's a fantastic idea. I don't know if it's something we need to officially vote on, but I am in favor of it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, so for some of you that don't know, I worked in the mayor's office in 2019. And so, working with Mayor Bronin, just understanding how the process, right, and the expectations. So there are a lot of these federal groups or these national groups, and they will give you the information, or they will give you support if you do X, Y, and Z. And so in that regard, I would definitely need to chat with you offline to find out what those expectations are. If we have a sense of it's something that is reasonable and something that we can do as a city, then I will absolutely work to approach the mayor's office about that. But again, because I don't work in the mayor's office anymore, I just want to make sure that I have an understanding, because I have to run everything through city council.
Sure. And David, it was interesting. A friend of mine's daughter works for the mayor's office in Providence. And they've got a pilot program going that they're hoping to, get started this summer. So I asked that question of her, kind of what do they expect? And, she responded, it's not really that they expect not anything, I'm not sure how to phrase it, but really it's a research project, right? So, a city being involved obviously, gives them visibility, right? And supports the cause for guaranteed income. And then also it provides research to Penn, for all of the work that they will be doing. She did say that because, the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, donated $18 million. So they were giving out up to $500,000 to each city. So she said that when
that caught my eye.
right, and she's not sure what's left, but she also said, and she said it's they think it's a wonderful opportunity being part of MGI. She had no qualifications at all because they got funding, they have all this support, they have this research, they have this guidance. But the one thing she did say is, when MGI funds a little bit over half of the program, then they have a little bit more say perhaps in how it's set up. Maybe it's the research or evaluation, but if you look at this Excel spreadsheet, there's a lot of flexibility that the cities have in designing their program. So that, because I asked I asked that question too, and it's I can't say, but it sounds like it's more, they're really happy to have cities become part of the initiative and, take advantage of all the resources that are offered.
So Carolyn, I want to ask a question. I just don't know the answer to this. So when David asked me to be involved, I said there's sort of two levels at which I can be involved. And in one level in which I can be involved, I'm just go to these meetings and I hopefully provide useful advice, maybe read some stuff, and I'm a volunteer, right? The other way I could be involved is as a program evaluator, right? And if I am a program evaluator, then I'm committing to do a lot more work, a lot more detailed design work, a lot more detailed data analysis work. So what is important here, not necessarily in a yes, do it or not, don't do it, but for me, at some point, I do want to understand sort of the arrangement. Is this sort of this group in Penn got a lot of money to launch a lot of UBI pilot program projects that they will, as researchers, evaluate. And oftentimes that means they have essentially ownership of. And if that were to happen, that would be fine, but it would mean that I would then say, hey, I'm going to limit my amount of time. I'm going to be, quote, a volunteer, not a program evaluator. And that means I'm going to spend less time on this. And so I just don't know what that circumstance is, but it is sort of important to sort of know that for the academics here, there are sort of two potential roles we could play.
Right.
And one is someone who's going to actually be part of a research team. And the other role is as just a volunteer providing, feedback in the interest of Connecticut while some independent research team is evaluating this project. And as I said, I am flexible taking either role, but it is sort of important sort of upfront sort of figure out what they are doing. Did they get a lot of money to get a lot of UBI projects started and to assure that those projects have good program evaluation? Or did they get a lot of money to do program evaluation of a whole bunch of UBI projects that they would get started? And those are two slightly different things, and they have sort of real implications for sort of my time allocation over the next couple of years.
Right. And that'd be a really good question, right, for MGI. But it was interesting because Providence, they're focusing on the homeless. So that I'm sure that, the city is doing a lot of program evaluation, but.
And that would probably.
Did we lose Steve? I think we lost him.
Okay.
Carolyn. Yeah. So Carolyn, one of the things that I wanted to say was that in response to your comment, that, one of the things that we have to look at when we build this project out is what the cost is going to be and where the funding is going to come from, right?
Absolutely.
And so we haven't asked that question yet of David around those specifics, but when you apply for and receive funding from a funder, they always come with certain strings attached that shape
Sure.
that shape what it is that you're going to do, right?
Mhm.
And I know that it was not my understanding that we would invite Penn into the folks from Penn into this project, and I don't actually think that they would be looking to do that based on a hunch based on the conversation that I had with Dr. West. They could be, they offered a certain level of support, but I didn't ask them about funding. And so,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, the funding comes from MGI and they partner with UPenn. So I don't, I just know. And I also wanted to clarify too that, I really can't be categorized as like a community member. I mean, I live down in Killingworth down by the shore. So I've been very involved, with this one program I've done, but as I agree with what everyone has said, I wouldn't be characterized that way. It'd be really important, to get additional community members who really understand, Hartford more than I do. What I was thinking my role would be, I'm glad to help out because I don't have the knowledge that the professors have or the knowledge of the community, but I'd be glad, to be sort of a worker bee and help out the task force.
David, can I back up a little bit and just ask a more basic question is, when we start thinking about setting up the program, then evaluating the program, that's all great. But what are do we actually fully understand the parameters around budget, et cetera, for setting up? It's very hard to think about setting up a program unless we understand what our constraints are. Like how many people can we treat with this program, et cetera. We've thrown some numbers out, but nothing has been really definitive. Do we even have any buy-in on any of that yet?
So the short answer is yes. The long answer is I've been in communication with folks who are interested in providing funding, but that is not my goal for our pilot. I also have to think about how are we going to support the operations of the program. And so getting the funding together, I think last meeting we discussed $150,000 to basically allocate $500 per month to 25 families. That would come up to about $150,000. Steve brought up the fact that, we're looking to needs to do an annual payment for our control group. And so, we're open to looking into that as well. But I think that, as the city council, we need to really make sure that we have the capacity to support the participants. And I just don't know if we're there.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the big question that's on everybody's mind. There's the compensation to the participants who are the recipients in the control group. Then we have, if we're going to have someone who is doing onboarding or providing any kind of benefits counseling, if we're hosting any kind of community forums, and then in terms of having a website for distributing data, all of those things require the kind of funding that has to be built in.
I have a question about this issue in terms of counseling. A lot of state efforts have been offered onto nonprofits in the state of Connecticut over the last decade. And my question is, while I'm very familiar with the nonprofits that work on fair housing in Connecticut, is there a nonprofit that might not be based in Hartford, but operates in Hartford and is primarily around helping people with program eligibility, whether it be for TANF or applying for earned income tax credit? Is there a nonprofit operating in the Hartford area that has as its mission sort of helping people with program eligibility? I just don't know the answer to that, but if there was, that would be possibly an incredibly valuable partner.
So what I would say, for the sake of time, because we're already 40 minutes in, perhaps what we do offline is I can connect with Carolyn to discuss further the programs that she's referring to and the partnerships that, was sent out to everyone. Then Adam and I can work to identify nonprofits who could provide some of those wraparound services. And in the meantime, we'll try to present some kind of an update on those two elements at our next meeting, so that, you know, this group, we can stay focused on, you know, how are we going to conduct the research. I can tell you that we have no desire at this time to expand beyond the 25 participants. If someone came to us, you know, next month and said, look, we'll give you $500,000 and we're going to have a complete hands off, that might be a different thing. Because at that point we can hire the staff to support more families participating. But at this point, there's not been a single partner that I've spoken with that is 100% hands off. And we have no interest in, you know, not being able to develop a program that we have 100% control of. So that's why we're not, you know, actively seeking a financial partner. Right now, I feel fairly confident that we can secure funding to support the 25 families. We have the capacity within City Council to support the 25 families, and we have partners in the community who have told us that, you know, they'd be interested in working for wraparound services for those 25 families. If we were to increase that to 50 families or 75 families, that's a whole different ballgame.
But David, there are certainly costs. I mean, all of us are, if we're program evaluators, we're providing essentially free labor, but there are going to be costs for the nonprofits. Nonprofits in the state of Connecticut right now are really stressed. They're going to have a bill for those wraparound services, because otherwise they're not going to have the capacity to provide them. There's going to be money, as I said, there's going to be money necessary for administering surveys, you know, possibly paying undergraduates or graduate students to go out and collect the actual survey data, as well as compensating the families. So, I mean, I'm just not sure saying you have enough money to pay the 25 people the stipend they need is not saying you have enough money, right?
Well, we do have additional funds built in for administrative costs, but we're also supplementing this program through federal allocations that are given to our nonprofit partners. And so, you know, we basically said, you know, you're going to receive additional funds. Here are some of the services that we would like to see provided to receive those funds. But what I'm saying is that there are conversations that we as city officials have with folks every day in the community. And I'm happy to provide updates to the task force and to members of the community so that they're aware of what we're working on. But I'm not comfortable reporting anything until it's final. But I do want to assure the task force that we are taking into consideration the fact that we're going to need more than $150,000 to support this program. And we are working to secure that.
Thank you, David. We'll follow up over, you know, our offline, or, you know, via email.
On a new topic, not a new topic, but we sort of got onto this partnership thing, and we had been talking about community input. And I'm wondering to some extent whether we should go back there a bit in terms of design. I think it's really important to get a sense of what questions are most important to the community, right? So for example, if kids' outcomes are the most important or if kids' outcomes in school are the most important, then that's going to have very specific design requirements in terms of what we need to do in terms of with only 25 treatment samples, in terms of being able to sort of have kids who've had a test score and have a couple more years where we can observe test scores, for example, not because test scores are the be all and end all, but if, for example, kids in school are the priority, you're going to want at least that as one of the things you're looking at. On the other hand, if family well-being is a little more of the priority, then maybe we need to sort of look at other partnerships with other agencies that I'm less familiar with. But there's many different questions we could ask with this effort. And I think the community is that's where the community should really be pushing us, telling us, well, our priorities are this as opposed to this.
Yeah, I can't even agree with Steve more on that one, right? If our primary interest is in labor market outcomes of single mothers, then really we need to be talking to DOL, clearly. But if our interest is in the kids of these mothers, then we need to really be thinking about CDE and community partners that work with kids. So it really does matter. And so we should, a starting point should be thinking about what are our primary questions of interest, because we don't have enough money to address all of them, most likely.
David, I
Right.
have a question. It's Colleen.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned 25 families. Is it going to be income driven? How are you going to find out, how to give them this money? Is it by how much money they make? And how long is it going to go for? Is it a year?
Right, those are specifically, those are excellent questions and things that we have not as a group determined yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I had mentioned the Alice indicator to look at folks who are on that income cliff, which
Okay.
means, basically folks who, if they earn $1 more, they lose their benefits.
Mm-hmm.
That is my idea about who we should include. But again, as a committee, we have not made any of those decisions yet.
I think that David originally said that they had enough money. I mean, to be very specific in terms of what David told us 2 weeks ago, David, correct me if I'm wrong, that we had enough money, that the city of Hartford had enough money to run the UBI for 25 families for a year. David, is that correct or is that incorrect?
Yes.
But I did want to address this issue about who. One of the problems, and this is why I wrote that document that I distributed to everybody. I don't know if everybody got it because the membership is evolving, about sampling. And one of the problems is if you look at the Stockton report, the way they sampled was very diffuse. They had very little information, right? And so what they did is they picked poor neighborhoods, and then they randomly selected addresses in those poor neighborhoods, and they sent out invitations. If you want to identify single parent families, you can't do that, right? How do we find single parent families? One example is that we could go to the state administers temporary assistance for needy families. If you look over the last 3 or 4 years, you would find a large number of Hartford residents who had applied for TANF, and there will be some administrative data on them from when they applied and when they were, if they were a recipient until they got off. That would be one channel by which we could get some information about these people. But the truth is, in this, it's not like we can simply go and say, well, here's the income cutoff we want, here's the family structure we want, and we can now just go and pick our population of people who meet this requirement in Hartford. We need actually some administrative database that has had access and has gathered populate information from for some specific administrative reason in order to draw a sample. And the reason I identify TANF is because TANF usually does actually have a lot of good information on family structure. So we will know that there are kids in the house. We will know if it is a single parent. They will also have some information on income. So we could establish some criteria about income eligibility or eligibility in terms of age of kids. But we have to actually have a way to find people that's relatively systematic so we can find a population of eligible people who are living in Hartford. And we're not just going to be able to say, this is what we want and be done. We're going to have a strategy where this is an administrative database that will allow us to do something. Now, what's in there and what can we do and what can't we do?
No, that's great input, Steve. Amanda, and Tom, I really appreciate your input as well. For everyone that's on the call, if you can open your chat, we're having some conversation through the chat with some of our community residents. Amanda, with the work that you do you have any thoughts on some data that you might have access to that might be able to drive some of our initial efforts?
I do not have access to any, any of the type of data that I think would be useful here for Hartford. I think my data contribution will be more prospective. I don't know if exactly what kinds of data access you might be referring to.
If I may interject, one of the ways I agree that TANF might be a good approach to take, although a lot of the folks who have TANF engagement are not employed, and so that would be a problem for this study. Another approach would be to partner with agencies in Hartford that work with families and see if we can recruit that way.
Yeah, and we have been approached by some of our community partners who have told us, you know, if you're looking for families or participants, you know, we can provide you with some lists of folks. You know,
Yeah.
Gina, I'm curious, before we continue, because we are limited on time, can you give us a brief overview of your conversation with the seed researcher? What were some of your initial takeaways?
Oh, sorry, you've kind of put me on the spot a little bit. Let me,
We can come
sorry.
back to it. No worries. If you
Yeah,
could
I
pull it up.
sent some emails with some notes. And once I do that, it kind of flies until I review it again. But I will say a couple of the key themes that came out were that the folks that they recruited, that there were huge issues around trust. And so transparency was really important because when people hear that they can get money, there's always the, well, what kind of string is attached, and, you know, what are you expecting? And so, you know, that was a really key issue in the conversation that we had. Another piece of it was that the community provided input in terms of things like how to implement the study. For example, the community members came up with the idea of having the debit cards and reporting via text messaging. Those were the things that came out from the community. And then when they worked on the dashboards to provide the data, they were involved in saying, well, these are the data that we think members of the community would be interested in seeing, and in a format that folks will understand when they're not researchers. So that was a lot of what we wound up talking about. She provided me with their pre-analysis plan for us to be able to look at what they did in trying to design something of our own. And so, you know, that was a big piece of the conversation as well, in terms of, you know, we need to have this driven by what are our research questions, right? And we need to think about what the community holds as most important in this project. And to that end, if we're working with 25, oh, and that was the other thing, is when I mentioned that you had said 25 families, I had brought up this concern about power analysis with having such a small sample. And so we need to decide if we're, you know, Steve's idea of having an active control and a passive control along with the recipients, which is what Stockton did, would give us, you know, 75 people, but it's 25, 25, and 25, right? Which is still a small number. And so another option is to not do random control trial. She had suggested that instead we just choose 25 families and make this, I guess, well, not exclusively a qualitative analysis, but really go more deep in terms of, you know, demystifying the lives of families and what they do with the funds.
I will say, if you want to demonstrate effects of the program, given that we're recovering from the pandemic, not having a control group is a disaster. If you want to uncover how people use the money, that's great, and that could be the goal of this project. But if you want to say the project had certain effects, it's impossible without a control group, especially in a world where we're recovering from the pandemic. And that's going to be a decision that's made, because it depends on the goals.
And I agree with you 100%, Steve. It was just, that was something for us to think about as, you know, adding to the conversation.
And I agree with that point as well, Steve. And I also just really want to underscore that when we, as a task force, are deciding what our research goals are, we cannot assume that our research goals match the city goals. And I know that's been said by many other people here, but you know, we most likely don't match them in a lot of ways. And I'm interested in stress hormones, but that might not be an outcome of interest. And so we just really need to, like others have said, make sure we're working on behalf of the community for the outcomes of interest.
Well, and from our perspective on city council and the conversations that I've had with folks, and so 25 families in a city of a lot of need is not, it's no real long-term impact. We understand that, you know, we're not going to see a drastic change and improvement in everyone's lives because of this pilot. Our goal is to produce enough research that we can then approach some of our foundations and say, look, we implemented this. Here's some of the data. Because the foundations that I've had conversations with, they are interested in funding us long term, but they need to see the data. And so with that being said, our goal, I think, in the short term is to provide immediate assistance to families that we know that are in need. But the long-term goal is to make sure that we have the research in place to provide long-term sustainable funding so that we can increase the impact of a program like this. And so we're able to help more families.
David, I think what's really important here when you're talking to these funders is to get a sense of, in this first stage, what is more important? Is it to demonstrate your ability to implement the program, or is it to demonstrate that the program had positive effects?
Yes.
If it's all about implementation and showing that you can do it,
Yes.
then what was suggested by the people in Stockton is entirely a reasonable approach. But if they need to see evidence of positive effects before they put more money on the table, then it's not, right? And so to know what they're looking for is going to have a big impact on this question of random assignment.
I totally agree.
Okay, so perhaps what I'll do is I'll circle back with some of them, give them another update on where we are, you know, provide them with some information about, you know, what some of our goals are. I do know that there was one in particular that wanted to see our research questions. Based on the initial report that we submitted, it sounded like, you know, 1, 2, and 3 were pretty good. I would like, now that we've had a little bit more time to digest, if we can come up as a task force with our goals, our research goals. I can work with Colleen and with some other members of the community and with our administrative staff to start to, you know, gather some input from residents on what are some of their goals. I know that, you know, Tom and Donna both contribute to Hartford News. It would be great if we could get some feedback from residents on what they would like to see from a program like this.
Actually, David, that's what I was going to suggest, is maybe the first thing we need to do is host a community forum where we hear from folks in Hartford about what they would be interested in, you know, as a baseline.
I love it. Let's do it. We'll get a date in June, you know, and I think that we can put, if we have 3 to 4 weeks to put something like that together and make sure that residents are aware of it, you know, I think that we can really make something happen the end of June. If we want to wait till the first week in July, I'm open to that too. But, you know, if that's something that's going to really help drive our work, I'm all for it. Let's do it.
Could I propose as an action item then for the task force before the next meeting in 2 weeks that all of us, you know, who are members and chairs, maybe somewhere we can collate our, I don't know, top 2 research questions or top 2 burning questions, right, from this project. And then we might be able to see a lot of overlap where there is repetition and something rises to the top, or we can at least get an idea of what each of us is thinking. And then we could combine that with the community input to draft our final research questions.
I think that's a brilliant idea, Amanda. I've already started a list on my own. I will also talk with our field director at my university about agencies within the Hartford area that serve folks who might be good resources in terms of both benefits, counseling, and possibly recruitment.
I know the Urban League would be one of them, the CRT, even the Y. I know they do a lot of stuff with Hartford, CRT.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Eric, I'm curious, did you have an opportunity to connect with your survey specialist?
Yes, I did. And She is willing to join us and help out in her capacities, although she said she's quite busy, but she's willing to volunteer time.
Awesome.
David, should I have her, should I email her and have her think about joining us for the next meeting?
That would be great.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Jennifer Deneen is her name. I will do that.
Steve, are you trying to say something to us? Your mic is off.
Yeah, I didn't know if he was talking to the air, if he was trying to talk to us.
Yeah.
That was me thinking out loud. My mic was muted, so you wouldn't hear me thinking out loud, which is the way I wanted it.
Oh.
Thank you.
Once again, thinking someone's talking to me, it takes me back to prom. So I'm curious, it's 4 o'clock now. Are there any final thoughts? I think that Adam and I definitely have our work cut out for us. Tom and Donna, I would love to connect with both of you offline to see if you'd be interested in helping us get the word out and what you feel would be best for us to get ready for this community forum. And then for Amanda, Eric, Steve, Gina, if you could put together some research questions. Carolyn and I, if you and I can touch base after to do some more research into the mayor's effort. And then Colleen, I would really like for you to connect with Adam to start to get together a running list of organizations in the city that would help us identify not just families, but also help us with services. And
Okay.
yeah, and then we can kind of bring that to the table at our next meeting.
I will say again, don't rule out the idea. I mean, I understand it's nice to have families handed to you, but then you do have hand-picked families handed to you, right? Right. So you're working with a population that's already engaged with a nonprofit that's helping them, right? Where if you were to run a sample of people in Hartford through some administrative database, you might get a population that is less engaged with public services and might be helped a lot more by a UBI. And so, so I think there is some concern that when you cherry pick the people that nonprofits are identifying, you get a population that's supported, and you might understate the effects of a UBI for the population of the Hartford area.
Right. And to that end, I would say, in addition to TANF, if I didn't already say it, another avenue could be folks with Section 8 vouchers, for example. You know, some HUD data that might be the way to go.
State also, so that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
We'd have family structure and income on them also.
Right, exactly. And Amanda, as another action item, did we agree that we were going to use the website she recommended, or retabling that, Asana? Because if we agree, then maybe you could just set it up.
Everyone's I can set us a working group.
Yes, I was going to say, so I've used Asana before, and it is very helpful in organizing workflow. And so Amanda, if you and I can touch base, I'll bring Adam in on that too. Adam's a little familiar with Asana.
Sure.
Perhaps the three of us can kind of strategize on how best to leverage that platform to make us more efficient.
Sure.
Okay, so there's a lot to do. I definitely appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. I'm hoping that at the next meeting, we'll be able to provide some real input. Think about a date for next month. Again, if we needed to wait until the early July to give residents enough notice, I really, really, really want to do that community forum. And so think about some time that might work best for your schedule, and we can try to solidify a date at our next meeting. Great.
Yeah.
Any last closing thoughts, anyone?
Thank you for your leadership, David.
Ah, shucks. You're welcome.
And I got at the outset just to say how honored and excited I am to be part of this group. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're definitely grateful for everyone's support, and looking forward to continuing this work, because we really do see the impact something like this in the long term. And with that,
David, I think we need to add more families though, like California did.
do you mean to the task force?
No, for the funding, you said 25, but I guess we don't have all the funding.
Well, it's not even
25.
that's a good point, and I'll close you out soon, but it's not even just a matter of funding. I'm also thinking of capacity to implement the program. We're talking about needing an infrastructure in place for a year to support the families who are a part of it. Right now, I feel pretty comfortable with the staff that we currently have to support 25 families throughout the year for a program like this. If we increase the number of families, then we're definitely going to need to look into hiring additional staff, which is going to require more funding. But it is worth looking into, Colleen, because like I said, we do want to help as many people as we can.
Right, and the need is there.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 4:06 p.m. Again, thank you all for taking the time, and I'll talk to everyone offline.
All right, have a good weekend.
You too. Enjoy your holiday.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.